Welcome back to a new data analysis tutorial. In this video, we are going to talk about pivot table function of Pandas. I'm going to do a lot of examples and I'm going to cover how we can use it with different setups. Let's start coding. Okay, I'm in VS Code, but you can use any code that you want, and I created the Jupyter notebook. I'm going to be working on that since we can go cell by cell. And firstly, I'm going to create a cell in here and I will say import pandas as PD. And firstly, let's talk about the pivot table at the start. In Pandas, pivot table lets you group and summarize your data quickly. It's like different version of group by with more flexibility. And we can directly start coding right now. I will also import NumPy. And then I'm going to create a data set for us to work in the video. I'm not going to type it with my hands because I don't want this tutorial to be too long. I want it short and informative. So number of rows is going to be 100 and I'm going to paste my data in here. Now we are going to have our data ready. I'm going to talk about the columns and stuff. When I created the data frame, I will say data frame, pandas, data frame, and data like this. And we can code data. So here we just quickly create the data frame with the code that I prepared before the video. And we have like the region, product, salesperson, units sold, unit price, and date columns in here for this tutorial. And also we have both categoric and numeric data in this data frame. Let's create a different column like total revenue, which is going to be units sold multiplied by unit price. So we are going to have one more extra column on that side. Great. And let's start using pivot table. Let's say that we want to know the average revenue for each region. Then we can say pivot 1. I'm going to go with giving them numbers. Pandas, pivot table, data frame, values are going to be total revenue. Since we want to find the averages on that side, index is going to be region. So when I call pivot 1, we are going to see that we have the region wise total revenue. Okay, what if we want both units sold and total revenue averages by region? Then we will say, let's say pivot 2, it's going to be pandas, pivot table, we will say data frame, values is going to be units sold. We are going to pass a list in here since we want to give 2, and we will say total revenue after that. Like this. And then we are going to set the index as region. So let's see the pivot 2. Here it is. Great. Now we have the average units sold and revenue per region in here. Great. Also region is set as index. If you want to just get that as column, you can pass reset index. Okay, so let's call the pivot 2 again and continue on our examples. So let's use different aggregation functions. Let's sum up total revenue instead of averaging. So I will say pivot 3 is going to be pandas, pivot table, data frame, values are going to be total revenue. And we are going to say index is going to be the region, and aggregation function is going to be sum this time. So let's see the difference on here. Here it is. So by default it's the average, and if we say sum we can see the totals like this. And in pivot 1 we have the averages. You can see that on the sums we have this on this side. Okay. Let's continue with passing multiple functions. Like I will say pivot 4 and it's going to be pandas, pivot table, we are going to pass data frame, values are going to be the total revenue, and next up we are going to say index is going to be region again. And now I'm going to set aggregation function. I'm going to give a list like let's get the mean, and then also get the sum, also get the maximum. So we are going to get the maximum value, sum of and the mean. Let me call the pivot 4 in here. Here it is. Great. We can add columns to pivot tables too. So on pivot 5 we are going to be talking about that. I will say pandas, pivot table, I'm going to pass data frame, values are going to be total revenue again, and next up I will say index is going to be region, and columns are going to be the product, and I'm going to say aggregation function is going to be sum, and also I'm going to pass fill value as 0. So we are going to be creating a new column as product in here. Let me call the pivot 5. Here you can see that we have product in here by region like this. And this fill value 0 here fills NA values with 0, if there is any, but in our case we don't have any NA values. Okay, right now let's talk about multi-index pivot tables. So let's call that pivot 6, and pandas pivot table. I'm going to pass data frame, values are going to be total revenue, and this time we are going to give a list in index. So index is going to be region, and let's also take salesperson, and I'm going to give aggregation function of, let's say, sum. Okay, let's see the pivot 6 right now. Great. We can see we have two indexes, region and salesperson, in here. Let's talk about adding margins. So we are going to add row and column totals using margins parameter. Pivot 7 is going to be pandas pivot table. Data frame values will be total revenue, and index is going to be region, and columns product, and aggregation function is going to be sum. We will say margins true. This is how we add the margins to totals at the end, and also let's give it a name like margins name total. So on pivot 7 we are going to have something like this. We can see we have the total column wise and row wise in here. Okay, let's talk about custom functions. I'm going to say pivot 8, and this time let's count the number of transactions instead of summing. So pandas pivot table, I will say data frame values total revenue, index is going to be region, columns will be product, and I'm going to say aggregation function. In here I will say lambda x, length of the x like this, and here we defined our function. I'm going to say fill value with 0. So let's see pivot 8. Here it is. Okay, now let's talk about multi-value and multi-aggregation functions. So pivot 9, this is going to be more advanced. I will say pandas pivot table, and then data frame. Next I'm going to set values. Let's add multiple values like units sold with total revenue. Next up I will say index product, and I'm going to say columns region. I'm going to set the aggregation function like it's going to be a dictionary. Units sold, it's going to be sum, and I'm going to pass different on the total revenue side. Total revenue will be mean, and let's also add fill value 0. So let's see the pivot 9. Okay, great. We have the total revenue and units sold like this by region, and for different aggregation functions. Here we have the sums, here we have the means on this side. So right now let's do our final example. I'm going to pivot over time. Let's see the average revenue monthly. So I will say data frame.head for remembering the data set. We have the dates like daily basis, and I will say data frame month, data frame date, date time to period. I will say monthly. So I'm going to have the month right now here, and I'm going to say pivot 10 is going to be pandas pivot table. I will pass data frame values is going to be total revenue, and index is going to be month, and columns is going to be product, and aggregation function is going to be mean, and let's say field value 0. So we are going to have pivot 10 ready in here. Okay, so here we have an NA value and it's filled with 0. Let's remove this and see what's going to happen. If we don't say fill NA, you can see we have an NA if we don't say fill value like this. So we have the pivot 10 ready in here on month basis. And let's say that we created any of these pivot tables. For example, let's take the pivot table 9. Like this. Let's say that we want to export this. Right now I don't have any Excel files in my directory, and we can say pivot 9 to Excel, and we can say like pivot table dot xlsx, and now I'm going to have this ready in here, and you can check the file. I'm not going to say, actually let's say open. I don't have anything for viewing Excel files from VS Code, but you can export your pivot tables in this way. And that was it for the pivot tables. We made a lot of examples and we talked about a lot of stuff. Thanks for watching. Let's get to the outro. Thanks for watching this tutorial. I have a playlist named Python Data Analysis Tutorials, where I have more than 40 videos just like this one. You can reach that playlist from the cards of this video or from the links in the description. Also, I'm sharing a new data science video every week on my channel. You can subscribe for more videos like this. Have a great day.